the system is really woeful. Why aren't people getting better sentences or harsher sentences for those crimes in the first place? Why was he allowed to get anywhere near someone that we think he was involved with previously?
A terrible case this week involving a woman being attacked in Clapham. A woman was attacked with a very dangerous corrosive substance in South London, and the accused man, Abdul Shakur Azidi, is still on the run. He's been spotted in a number of places. Police are now searching properties, including in London and Newcastle. There's a big manhunt on for him now. The police have offered a £20,000 reward. But there's now big questions about why this person was roaming the streets. He was a convicted sex offender in 2018, and it's now been found that he was granted asylum on his third time applying after converting to Christianity. We had an interesting discussion on the show yesterday with a feminist lawyer, Charlotte Proudman, and Dr. Rakib Eshan, and actually there was quite a lot of agreement from them, which you do need to have a good and a generous asylum system, but big questions are being asked about why he was allowed to sort of commit this attack, particularly after he'd been convicted of a sex offence. Chloe Smith, why was he not? I mean, the government is absolutely obsessed with immigration. Why was somebody like this, why did he slip through the net, particularly after he had a sex offence?
Well, look, Aisha, I mean, of course, the answer to that is I don't know. I'm not privy to the full details of the case, but I do think this raises some extremely serious alarms. Of course it does. And if I may just pick up one of the notes that was struck in the prior segment of this, where Rosie was quite rightly saying, wanting to reassure people about the effect of dreadful crimes on them. I mean, I think there will be public concern actually about safety on the streets, if you like. So I can absolutely have sympathy with those concerns, and I would indeed expect the Home Office and all of the relevant agencies to be doing a very serious review of what's happened in this case, because it's clearly not right. Clearly something has gone wrong, and I would be very sympathetic to people feeling concerned about that, and that needs to be put right.
Rosie Duffield, what's your reaction to this story? And do you think if somebody is seeking asylum and they've been convicted of a sex offence, should they be given asylum?
That's a really difficult one, isn't it? And I think Gillian Keegan was right when she said this isn't actually necessarily just about asylum. This is about violent women, crimes against women being taken seriously. And, I think when Charlotte Proudman was on your show yesterday, what she was talking about was the fact that the system is really woeful. Why aren't people getting better sentences or harsher sentences for those crimes in the first place? Why was he allowed to get anywhere near someone that we think he was involved with previously? And time and time again, we see these so-called low-level sexual crimes like flashing and the things he was convicted of before, leading to much more serious harm against women, like Sarah Everard's killer, who was convicted of those kind of offences. So unless we start taking those really seriously and realising that the kind of people that commit them are likely to go on to greater crimes and committing more violence against women, we're not going to unpack this at all. But I think, the asylum thing, someone who commits these kind of offences shouldn't be given asylum when there are so many people who really desperately need it. And I'm not sure about whether he converted to Christianity just to get some asylum or not. I don't meet many people that do that to game the system, to be honest, because it's quite difficult to get through. But all of this needs looking at pretty urgently, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Amy Callahan, your reaction to this terrible, terrible story. And, look, there's two things here. There's a massive failure on the criminal justice side of things in terms of failing to protect women. The fact that this person was, convicted of a sex offence and clearly nothing happened to him. But there is also a failure of the asylum system. But there is a sort of crossover with them. I mean, a sex offence is quite a red flag. And if you are going through the asylum system, surely that should be a red flag in terms of your application.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly raises a number of questions. I see many a genuine asylum case coming through my office.
Yeah.
And it kind of strikes me how challenging it is for genuine folk to get asylum cases granted, never mind how, in this instance, how it's managed to slipped through the net. So I do think we need to consider that there could have been a failing by the Home Office, not necessarily saying that there has been, but I think we need to explore that a little bit more and kind of tease it out over the coming days and weeks. But certainly at the crux of this story is an issue of men's violence against women. It's something that's not going away. It's something that we have a really good news story to tell about in Scotland. We have a new fund opened by the First Minister just this past week called the Fund to Leave, providing women with a grant of up to £1,000 to help them pay for the essentials that them and perhaps their children would need to flee an abusive situation.
I actually think something kind of similar has been done with Women's Aid in England and Wales as well. We'll check into that, but that is a good scheme. Scott has messaged in saying the fact this man was an immigrant is grist to the mill for the Tory right and other populist parties. I've read that Britain is the acid attack capital of the world, so I don't really think that all of these attacks are carried out by immigrants. It's not about immigration, it's about violence against women. I mean, I think I think what's important is to not take one case and then completely generalise, but I think it is also, you should be able to have these discussions without fear or favour, because there's a really important discussion to be had about violence against women and girls, which we have regularly on this show. But I think it is also legitimate to ask the question, if this person was convicted of a sex offence and he was denied asylum, why did he get asylum? Should this not have been a red flag, Scott? And I actually think that doesn't mean that you're anti-immigrant. I think that is a legitimate question to ask. But Kitty, I mean, you've got, as I say, there's a number of elements to this. This is probably going to be will turn into kind of a big political issue.
Absolutely. And also you've seen two former Home Secretaries today, Priti Patel and Suella Braverman, who, let's just say, aren't the best of friends, but they've joined forces as rare allies and saying that the Church of England have got questions to answer. And I think you should see this within the context of the Rwanda bill going through the House of Lords at the moment. Some of the most vocal criticism of the government's stance on immigration has come from some of the bishops and the archbishops in the House of Lords. And I think you're seeing a kind of a fight back here from the Conservative right, saying, you know, James Cleverly did an interview today and said, the Home Secretary, and said, you know, if you can't think of a better idea, basically, then just back our bill. So you're sort of seeing a sort of subplot here of the Church of England coming under a lot of criticism, and I think there will be questions that they have to answer as well about whether they were providing, I don't know, slightly bogus references about whether this guy actually had properly converted to Christianity. The second point, I think, is clearly there's a kind of criminal gang element to this. The police, I think, today have offered £20,000 for help in finding this guy. We've seen the CCTV footage, excuse me, the footage of him wandering around. He's got a massive injury on his face.
Yeah, huge.
He must be in a lot of pain, and clearly he's being harboured by someone.
Right.
So I think the £20,000 reward is to try and smoke him out and hope that one of the gang members will turn him in.
I mean, Kitty, in terms of that attack on the sort of, you know, government figures, having got at the church, and look, I think it's fair enough to ask those questions. I think all questions should be asked without fear or favour and without an agenda to find out, because this is such a horrible case. We owe it to the woman, to the victim, in terms of to find out what happened. But surely that is a bit of deflection, because there's also huge questions about what went wrong with the asylum system, but also what went wrong with the criminal justice system in terms of why he was convicted of a sex offence. And as Rosie said, these are often sort of red flags. Wayne Couzens was caught flashing as well. These are often a sort of a spectrum of behaviour that can go somewhere very, very dark. Will the government not have quite serious questions to answer in the House this week about, you've got two things going. You've got the criminal justice system going wrong, you've got the asylum system going wrong.
Oh yes, and imagine Labour will try and drag a minister to the House tomorrow to answer questions on this. I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Aisha. I just think there's quite a lot of elements at play here, and the fact that the sort of, I don't know what the right phrase is, but it's a bit sort of like a gateway drug, isn't it? You start off flashing at a woman, and then the violence carries on and on, and these terrible results.
And I think one of the things psychologically, and I think everyone in the panel here will have done a lot of work with their constituents in terms of, women's groups and violence against women. Sending us when somebody does a behaviour like that and they are not punished, psychologically in their mind, they think they've got away with it and then they can escalate their behaviour. That is one thing that you hear from women's groups about sort of perpetrators. Let me just read a couple of messages. Gaz has messaged in saying, this animal never should have been here in the first place, surely. Where did he commit the sex offence? And if before he got there, then that should have barred him. And if it happened while he was here, he should have been sent back to his country of origin to serve his time. Lisa has messaged in saying, I agree with Scott about grist to the mill. However, would point out that the UK has got the highest level of recorded cases, emphasis on recorded, which doesn't necessarily mean the highest levels of cases anywhere. And Alf from Halifax has got a slightly different view. Alf is not happy, ladies. Alf says, where is the male opinion on this panel? Alf's not happy about this. Do we not count these days? Alf, rest assured, you do matter. You absolutely matter to us. We have lots of men on the show, but today we just happen to have booked a panel of 4 brilliant women. It's fine, Alf. The pillars of the temple are not going to fall down. Society will carry on as fine. You just got 4 very brilliant women from politics on the panel. It's going to be okay. Jules is messaging saying, I wonder how many foreign criminals or serious offenders are roaming around missing and free to repeat and offend and get away with it. I do think a lot of people are really, really worried about this story because it brings together quite a few different elements, and I think that's kind of understandable. Jonathan from Dulwich is messaging saying, this is a really interesting discussion on immigration and the asylum crisis and the endemic violence towards women and girl in the Azidi case. It's a respectful exchange between women on the panel. In the interest of discussing all views, can you really have this debate without considering the wide scale of abuse of white women by predominantly Muslim men over the decades, or is that too sensitive? Well, Jonathan, I think it's difficult to extrapolate from one case, and we don't know all the facts in this. We have had many discussions about that issue, and I think we have always got to be able to have these discussions which are honest without fear or favour. There have been many reports into, example, what happened in Rochdale, which found that there were some cultural sensitivities, but also it's important to look at the facts on all of this. If you do look at the kind of experts sort of who look into grooming in this country, it is not just sort of one group of men who do it. It is actually men across different religions, across different ages, across different parts of the country. You're absolutely right, Jonathan. Nothing should be too sensitive to discuss, but it is dangerous to kind of say that sort of all Muslim men are groomers. And I'm sure that's not what you're insinuating, but we do have to be mindful of that. But you're right, we have to ask these difficult questions.